an absolute privilege to be here. And really, I haven't prepared much for tonight. In fact, you were busy putting the preparations for me. From the perspective that I don't really want to get up and just talk a lot of shit. And I can. I mean, I could talk for 2 days because of the bullshit that you I really want it to be, I want you guys to be interactive. So please, you know, and I will give you the perspective of Nando's through the advertising that we've done and where we've gone somewhere along the route and kind of some of the stuff that we're doing now. So when we started in 1987. Fernando Duarte and myself, we loved the chicken in Rosettenville, and that was the very first shop that we bought. We bought into a place called Chicken Land, and I just love food. I love eating. I love food. I love particularly I love food from a particular place. So like the fact that this was Portuguese chicken, which is peri-peri chicken, I love the fact that it had a soul and it had a provenance, because we've got a chef here. So it had a certain sense that I just felt that we could take this product to the world. I knew nothing about the restaurant business, and I really didn't know what I was getting into. And I actually thought that this would be a sideline investment for me, and I would actually just invest. Fernando would actually be the guy behind the counter, and I would just come in on a Monday morning, take a little brown paper bag, and that would be my contribution. It never worked out that way, as it doesn't on most kind of startups, because what I found certainly is that A, Fernando didn't quite enjoy the business as much as I did, and B, it took a lot more money in terms of investment that we needed. And I found I was putting more money in, and actually not the brown paper bag was going the wrong way, going the right way. And I said, but this is not quite right. And then I thought, I better start getting into this business. Fernando's a technical guy. He's a brilliant, we are such a yin and yang as a partnership. It's been unbelievable. Because he's more about the detail and I'm more about the kind of vision and stuff. But what I found when I worked behind the counter is I just loved the product. And I loved being behind the counter. I loved talking to customers. I just loved the fact that Bones would come back. We'd serve a great product and Bones would come back at the end of the day. And I absolutely loved that. But I did know one thing, that ultimately we didn't want to be a commodity business. And if you look around at the kind of fast food business, you look at McDonald's, or you look at, McDonald's weren't in South Africa at the time, but we'd studied them globally. I understood instinctively what McDonald's was about and all the other kind of fast food businesses. And really they were about a commodity. They were about selling product as fast as possible, as cheaply as possible. And in food, the minute you start getting too cheap, you compromise on quality. You're not getting real stuff. And you've got to substitute, and you've got to do all kinds of dodgy things with food, because speed and food just is quite an interesting kind of balance. In fact, there's a movement now away from fast food into slow food. So I knew that we had to create a brand, and ultimately that's really what was the start of the Nando's kind of vision. Was we needed to brand it properly, and in branding something properly, that people would want to go and ultimately eat a Nando's, never mind eat peri-peri chicken. We wanted to create our own kind of identity, our own brand. And so very early on, we had, I don't know, probably 6, 7, 8 employees in the company. I hired a marketing director, because I've always felt that marketing was the way. I'm a very marketing driven kind of guy. I didn't even know we had the finance guys, the suits. I didn't respect the suits in the early days. Even today, they're flipping like little mosquitoes that come and tell you how you're messing up things. But I've got massive respect for suits. I mean, today, I should have listened to the suits much earlier. But we were just driving like the kind of front end and the kind of creativity and the energy. Because to me, that when you've got something that people want, you can always retrofit the kind of, which I've learned now, if we'd done it a bit earlier, it would have been better. So we looked for an agency. I thought we needed to find a good ad agency. And the first agency we found, Andrew, you'll remember them, McCann Erickson. I don't know, I think they're McCann today. I'm not sure if they're McCann Erickson, but we found McCann. And they did a program. So we were selling Portuguese chicken. And they did an ad campaign called I Am Portugal, I think it was called. It was a beautiful kind of Portugal landscape. And I thought, this is the agency for us. And I went in to meet the agency. And I met the client service person. It happened to be a woman named Josie McKenzie. Do you know Josie? Okay, so Josie worked for the agency, and I then pitched that we've got this Portuguese chicken. Remember, we've got 2 shops now, one in the south of Joburg and one in Savoy. We don't know what we're doing not traditionally from the restaurant business. And I said to Josie, this is our vision, and I love your kind of ad campaign. And maybe one day we can move into, apart from chicken, we can do a whole range of other things. And the chairman of McCann, I said to me, that's the biggest bullshit he's ever heard. You can, if you're creating a brand, you've got to stay with that brand. What do you want to start selling? Petrol one day? Because I said, no, we can do peri-peri sauces. So we can do restaurants and we can do peri-peri sauces. He was like, well, why don't you add petrol onto the thing? What do you add petrol and peri-peri? I mean, I find that peri-peri is a peri-peri sauce into restaurants is a complete connection. Okay? And you know, how can we? And he was like, he came at me and said like, so I remember leaving that meeting so despondent. And I said, and I ended up recruiting Josie to be our first marketing director. She phoned me to say, I love the vision. I said, well, come and join me. We haven't got money, but take a view, come and join us. And she then said, you've got to go meet an agency called Hunt Lascaris. Okay, come and meet John Hunt. They're a brand new agency. They're just starting out, they're creative. And so we went and met with John Hunt and Reg Lascaris. And the brief to them, and remember, 2 restaurants, I think by that stage we might have had 4 or 5 restaurants, I don't remember exactly, was the brief that we gave him was, and this is where the person got to close the ears a little bit, okay, is we want you as an agency to shit yourselves because we want to become famous on the back of you guys being nervous. So we want creativity. We want you guys to do something for your own agency. Exactly as Alon said, do something that makes your agency nervous because we want to ride on the back of it. So, and we want you to win every award in the book. If you can win awards with our kind of with our brand, we together. And so the very first ad that they did for us was banned. Okay, that was the. Now remember, we don't have money. Okay, so we got 0 money. We bought media. They go do it, and we blew the budget on the media. We couldn't spend money on the kind of fancy 30-second TV campaign. So this was the very, 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 very first Nando's ad. We don't show it many times because it's like, well, it was banned. So but I like to show it now, so we get some money back, or some kind of. But this was Nando's very first ad.
It's been a secret for hundreds of years. A secret brought to Africa by our Portuguese ancestors. This closely guarded secret is the mystery behind our delicious flame-grilled peri-peri chicken. Now, at last, we're ready to show the world the secret of how Nando's chicken is made.
This is from now. So let me tell you. So that ad was banned, okay? And it's like we now needed to come up with another ad because we paid for the media and we couldn't afford the media, so we had to find something. And so we said, Hans now had to come up almost immediately with, because they never thought it would be banned, but so Hans had to come up with another campaign, and this was the next ad that they did. So this is called bonking and this is called barking.
Nando's traditional peri-peri sauces, in extra hot, mild, garlic and wild herb, are delicious on meat, mouth-watering on fish, but particularly tasty on chicken.
Now that's for our sauces. And so in a way, okay, the cheeky personality, the kind of edginess of Nando's was born in the need that we had no money. We needed to take on the big boys. For us, the big boys at the time was KFC. I don't know if you guys are too young, but you remember Bimbos, okay? Longhorn. Those were the big players. Longhorn don't exist today, basically, and Bimbos are still around, but those to us were the big guys. And so we had no money, and we had to take on the big guys. So how do you do that? And you do that through being edgy and being creative and doing it that you suddenly start getting a voice, and people start, we used to get a lot of kind of coverage. This was followed by PR, but we didn't understand what PR was. We didn't, all of a sudden, from an agency point of view, Hunts were building their own brand. So from their point of view, they had a client that they can go and do stuff with, that were cheeky and willing to do stuff. But we slowly started building our brand and our kind of personality and our architecture of the brand. And we did it by mistake. I can tell you that it wasn't something that we did. It wasn't something that we did by sitting in a business school and saying, well, we're going to create a brand that's edgy, cheeky, eclectic, or whatever you want to call it. It was done through necessity. We just never had money to spend. So we needed, every time we did an ad, we needed to have controversy around that ad. And as the brand now, obviously, as you start getting that controversy, the newspapers and the PR people start saying, well, we know you guys are playing that game. You know you got an ad that's going to be banned. It was like becoming a little bit rote, that you've got an ad banned, so there's PR publicity. And so you start getting a little bit of negative. And in that negative, you've got to be very, very careful how you handle that kind of stuff. And that's something that we've really been perfecting over the last couple of years, of how you deal with stuff and what do you pick on and what don't you pick on? What are the issues that really drive things, and what are the issues that really piss people off? So you've got to be very, very careful. Over certainly the last 10 years, we've been very selective of how we got. We're building a brand. You don't want people to be unhappy. We did Blind Lady ad, which was one of those famous Nando's ads, and we got taken on by the. We thought we did an ad. It was around. We went to the Blind Association and shared the ad with the Blind Association. They loved the fact that we were treating blind people as normal. They just can't see, and so they were very happy that we actually did it. So when we flouted the ad, we never thought we'd get into trouble. But who took us on was the Guide Dog Association. Now we would never thought, because the guy had a guide dog that led her into a pole. We would never thought that the guide dog, who would have ever thought at that moment that the Guide Dog Association would take us on. And they started picketing Nando's restaurants with guide dogs outside the Nando's restaurant in Norwood. And how do you deal with that kind of stuff? And all we did was went out and took EPOL and fed the guide dogs. And again, we had our press. So you've got to be very jacked on how you need a team that really understand what's going on. You can't just do it from a client point of view. You can't just run an ad and then not defend that ad. And that's why a lot of people today say, we want Nando's kind of advertising. But if you're not that kind of client, you can't do that kind of advertising because you're going to get into shit. Okay, at the end of the day, what Nando's is, you've got two kids. You've got a really naughty kid and you've got a really good kid. The naughty kid does stuff and it's always getting into trouble, but always gets away with it. The good kid does one thing and he gets a smack because why did you do that? The expectation on the good kid is that he shouldn't be doing that. But the naughty kid gets away with murder, and Nando's is that naughty kid. We can do stuff and say stuff sometimes, but with respect. You've got to be very careful. And there are times that we've done stuff where we've pushed it a little bit, got a smack, and then had to withdraw a little bit with a bloody nose. And so it's a very, very kind of difficult situation sometimes to really get that right and to understand it. And over the last 30 years, it's been an amazing journey, a really amazing journey. And we actually had, for me, it's last year we did an ad. We did a documentary called Pluck with a guy that he took the South African political situation over from 87 to basically 2 years ago, and he took the Nando's advertising and overlaid the Nando's advertising and the South African political situation, and the most amazing kind of documentary you could ever imagine. And that to me was like the culmination of how we responded to various things at various times. And for me, it was like the culmination of 30 years of great advertising. It was almost like, for me, it was like, okay, here are 30 years, I can now step out and relax, which is not quite the case. But I interfere too much. I've always got a view on what is. I don't run the business anymore. I've stepped out. In 2010, I decided that the business didn't need me. They needed more of a process. It didn't need the kind of guy that I was a really bad CEO. I was probably the worst CEO you could ever want. I created a business that was a federation. It was a happy place, but it wasn't connected. If you had Nando's in Australia or Nando's in the UK or Nando's in In South Africa, you've got a different experience. So we needed a one world, one brand, one Nando's. And so to do that, you need to actually have somebody that's more process oriented. So I stepped out, and I've been focusing for the last probably 5 years on purpose, on the Nando's purpose and what it means to do stuff with purposeful and deep, and go deep into certain kind of communities. And we do a lot of work in purpose in South Africa, but I've taken on Mozambique as a country to really have a massive impact on. Let me stop here for 1 sec. Anybody, you guys are looking at me like, you're an ambulance. You guys are looking at me like I'm, I won't say it because the kids are here. But, anybody got a question? Anybody? What's your name?
It's Nolo.
That's it. What do they call you for short?
It's a Nolo.
Lolo. Nolo.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to know, is it really you guys who are creating all of these memes that you see on social media? Because I mean, the sauna will be said in an hour, and then in the next hour, Nando's already have an ad around it. So you guys are always on.
No, the guys are quick. Our advertising guys and our social media partners are unbelievably good. And what's happened today in social media, we get a lot of copycats which aren't formal Nando's ads. I mean, I can identify it immediately. I've just got one now. There was one for the South African cricket team that came out with saying, if you want runs, eat extra hot Nando's peri peri. And that wasn't a Nando's official ad. I think. I haven't asked the Nando's, but I just looked at the font, and I looked at the kind of the way the guys have laid it out. I thought, that's not our guys. Our guys, we've got a really strong team that understand the brand and hit it quick. You've got to be relevant. And I mean, that's the challenge, is how you're relevant. And that's why I'm no longer relevant. And I mean it with absolute due respect. I don't know what's going on in this town. I don't know what's going on in the world of the youth to a certain extent, which is where the relevance of the brand gets recreated. So our guys are young, kind of hip. We've got to trust them that they know what they're doing. I'm a dinosaur, honestly, and I mean it with absolute respect. All I can do is give that kind of broad. So where I'm sitting at now is I'm just you know, I call myself co-founder. I sit back and I just do purpose stuff, and every now and again just put my hand up and say, I think we should be doing this and should we do that, and try to interfere as little as possible, but sometimes people think I interfere too much. It's keeping that balance of, because I'm a baby, and it's hard to stay away from your baby, and when you see things aren't right, or from your own perspective are right, but you really have to trust the guys. And so our social media guys are brilliant. I don't even know who the agency is at the moment that does it, but I do know we get a lot of acclaim for it.
And how do you also, with you guys having expanded into other countries, keep it authentic? Like, it was born and bred in South Africa, so I'm thinking that it's a very big contributor in terms of how your vision is driven. Like you said, you stepped away because you wanted to create one brand that was uniform across. So how do you keep that up?
It's a very good question. So interestingly enough, Nando's today is operating in 23 countries, and it's got 1,200 restaurants around the world. Okay, so 1,200, we've got 35,000 Nandokas, so people that work in the Nando's family. And the business started in South Africa, so it was born in South Africa, but ultimately, if you look at the size of the business, we're bigger in the UK than we are in South Africa. So if you look at the footprint of restaurants, we're 300 restaurants in South Africa, and there are 440 restaurants in the UK. And around the world, there's 1,200, of which 9 of which I was never good at maths, so someone's we've got 300 restaurants in South Africa, 900 around the world. Okay, so what we looked at, and the kind of mismatch here is quite interesting, is that we sell Portuguese chicken. Okay, now Portuguese chicken is really Mozambican Portuguese chicken. It's not chicken from Portugal. The first ads we did was said a taste of Portugal. Okay, that's what we thought. Then we did some research, and we actually found that the chicken, the heritage and the peri-peri comes from Mozambique. It's Mozambican peri-peri. The birds are from Mozambique. And so it's not a taste of Portugal, it's actually a taste of Mozambique. Okay? But in essence, it's not really a taste of Mozambique. We want Nando's to be Nando's, and our heritage is the food comes looking at the chef, the food comes from Mozambique, the kind of flavor catalyst comes from Mozambique, but the business started in South Africa. But when we're in Washington, if you put a South African flag flying outside of Nando's, they're going to think we're selling boerewors or whatever. So you can't confuse a consumer in London or in America that we're selling, South African food. We're not selling South African food. We're selling peri-peri Portuguese chicken. We're having enough to explain it to ourselves what we're selling, never mind explaining it to an American who, really doesn't know anything about peri-peri Portuguese, flame grilled, nothing at the time when we launched in say Washington. So what we thought is, and also when you look at South Africa, you've got to take a view, what is South Africa really good at? Okay, we're not the best manufacturers in the world. I can tell you now, China will out manufacture us. What's South Africa best in? Cricket. I'll tell you, we used to be. In my day. I'll tell you, rugby, I'll tell you rugby, okay? And maybe Banyana, they're playing tonight, I think. Sorry? Humor, definitely humor, but creativity, okay? South African creativity is the best in the world, okay? And I'll tell you why, and I promise you, Andrew will hopefully agree with me, huh? If you look at the diaspora of South African creative directors around the world, creative directors around the world, in agencies around the world, how many have come out of South Africa? A huge amount of those guys. So the guys in Japan, in some agencies, South African creative director. New York, littered with Matthew Bull, I don't know how many guys. You pop some of the agencies that we work with around the world, South African guys sitting there, top creative guys. We've lost a fortune of creative genius. This country is bursting with creativity, okay? Because you don't need, in a time of turmoil or in a time of shortage of stuff, that's where creativity shines the best. If you throw too much money, in my career of Nando's, when I've had a lot of money, it's been my worst, most uncreative time at Nando's. Okay, I work well on a tight budget with a tight number, because then you make a plan on how you do stuff. So we sat back and we thought, what we really have is we are creatives. Okay, and how do we now unleash that creative in terms of the world? Now, you can't take our ad strategy. Remember that strategy started from South Africa, and you can't translate it into the UK or into Australia. They've got a very different humor. There's a very different kind of, you've got to understand what drives them. The UK, for example, we didn't do any advertising. So how we got our brand well known in the UK was through restaurant design and through building beautiful restaurants in the UK. So the footprint that we spent £1 million on a restaurant in the UK, and that was really part of the branding of the way that the UK established the brand. And so what we decided to do was, how do we take South African creativity to the world? Through art, now we've got the latest kind of stuff. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've taken art, we've taken guys like Tabiso and Joe, who did our light fittings, tables, chairs. You must see the portal to Africa, the Nando's portal to Africa. We've now offered South African creatives the opportunity of designing and fitting out our restaurants around the world. So we've now, our latest restaurant in Chicago, you cannot imagine how beautiful that restaurant is, which was in a way inspired and actually delivered largely, not the equipment and the kind of cold rooms and the grills, but the art is all South African art, 100% South African art. The light fitting is all South African. And you walk into that restaurant, you think you're in a world-class establishment. And that came from Khayelitsha. Okay, Tabiso came from Khayelitsha, and it's world-class. Tabiso actually won the best product at Design in Durban, and we took it to Milan to go and display in Milan the beginning of February. That's the role that Nando's can play today, is how we can take South Africa's best creatives to the world. And that's what we're focusing on now. We're focusing on how to take South African creatives, but they have to be world-class. It's not a social CSI program where we're saying, shame, we feel sorry for this artist, or shame, we feel sorry for this creative? Absolutely 100% not. If you're not world class, you can't join our program, and you've got to be committed. We've got to take the best of South African creatives to the world without in any way compromising that anyone sees it in the world, understands that this is world class. You can't go into Chicago and put a light fitting and it breaks and say, well, it's from Africa, we're so sorry. You know, that's not what we do. What we do is, when somebody sees that, it's got to be the best possible. And we as South African creatives sometimes underestimate our own potential. And that's my biggest kind of negative, is that like people think we're not good enough, that America is better than us. It's the biggest rubbish I've ever heard. We are beyond world class, and that to me is what South Africa's got to do. So that's how we took, long answer to a short question. That's how we were US, that was our unique selling, is that we took South African creativity, and so that we understood what to take from South Africa. We didn't take what we thought was some other stuff. We took that energy, and when you walk into a Nando's in London, or you walk into Nando's in Chicago, or to Sydney, or even Malaysia, you get that sense. You can't say, well, it's South African, but you get that sense of African energy that somehow, you can't put your finger on it, but if you dig into some research, who are these guys? I want to know, where's this from? If you dig into it, South Africa, you can get the story of various things, and you start digging. We want you to dig. We don't like to put stuff in your face that says, we want you to, it's a journey. We want this layered. Nando's is a layered brand. It's not just one. There's certain layers to it. So as you can see, I'm a creative. I love the creative community, and I think that's what's going to change the world, is creatives. So, what's your name?
John again.
Hi.
It's very interesting that you said you stepped away in 2010 to kind of focus on the purpose of Loeries. And I mean, one of the kind of catchphrases that we've heard over the past years is purpose-driven marketing. And because consumers don't tend to connect with a brand unless they align with their purpose. So, I mean, we sell chicken. So, chicken, how do you go, when you sell chicken, very tasty chicken, you go, this is the purpose of the brand that sells chicken?
Are you on the creative side or the entrepreneurial side? You're also on the creative side? No, on the entrepreneurial side. Okay, interesting. Because they're two bloody good questions. Nando's, whatever I've said in terms of external branding, okay, was where we started internally, where we started initially. But what we also realized is that Nando's is an inside-out brand. And what's inside the company has to resonate in the outside of the company. And there were times in our 30-year journey where people would love our marketing, but they never ate Nando's. So people would say, I loved, oh, great ad. So they go, when last did you have Nando's? Oh, probably 2 years ago. I say, well, you loved the ad, okay, but that didn't bring you into Nando's. Why not? And what we found was that because we never had inspired people working in the business, we actually were letting ourselves down. We became a great kind of portal for an ad agency, but the business itself wasn't doing well. So we were getting repeat customers, but it wasn't growing the business to the extent that we wanted. So we then realized that what we need to do is be very internally focused and look after our people. And so probably, and I don't know the percentage, but we spend an enormous amount of money on looking after the Nando's people. So we look after our people. So a lot of our purpose projects that we do are internal. We haven't gone on the stuff that I've been working on. I haven't for once gone external with that messaging. So the kind of thing that we do, okay, let me give you an example of Mozambique. Okay, so what we do in Mozambique is a couple of things. Number one, we do a program. We started a program which is also an interesting journey called Goodbye Malaria, which was the philosophy of Goodbye Malaria was that why can't malaria be sorted out by Africans for Africans in a very creative way? Why do we need foreign NGOs to come into the country to actually say this is how you're going to deal with malaria? If it's an issue for a country, why shouldn't that country, by its own people, deal with it? Why must we keep reaching out? And why must you always have a little kid with a tear and a fly saying, give us money. Okay, that to me is like the worst kind of picture. That's like begging. We become a begging bowl, and then people are saying, but that money is not going to charity. So we're going to the place that we want to go. So we got involved in taking malaria, which is the #1 issue in Mozambique, to say we're going to sort out Mozambique by really creating something magical and doing it in a very different way. And so the last 4 years, we've started from a startup, from zero, from not nailing one mozzie. Okay, so we didn't know I didn't know what spraying a mosquito was. We handed out malaria nets all over Africa. We then started focusing on Mozambique. And we focused on Mozambique because the Minister of Health of Mozambique, we were honored with some work that we did at the UN. And the only reason we were honored for the work that we did at the UN was the 2010 World Cup. Because they needed like two suckers. You know, the UN came to Africa, hosting a World Cup hosted the World Cup in South Africa. We need 2 people that have done something in malaria, locals, you know. We were the only 2 locals, because who in South Africa really knows much about malaria? They found me and a guy that inspired me to do it called Kingsley Holgate. And so they honored us in the UN in New York, and the 2 of us arrived in New York, and it was the biggest waste of time we've ever had, except this was the home of malaria fighting. And we realized that nobody knows how to deal with malaria. Like, nobody's got an answer. And at that, we met the Minister of Health of Mozambique, and he came and he said to me, can you sort out something for us in Mozambique? And at that forum, we met a guy in Ghana that had done some incredible work in Ghana. We called him and said, come with us to Mozambique. And we started nailing mozzies that day. Now, 4 years later, we've protected 1.2 million people of malaria. So 1.2 million people are sleeping well tonight in Mozambique because of what the work that Nando's inspired. We kick-started it. We had to raise $4 million. I had to commit to $4 million. Now, if you take a number, $4 million, it sounds quick, $4 million, okay? I had to sign that Nando's is underwriting that we will raise $4 million, and then we got from the organization called the Global Fund, they gave us $25 million. So we 4 million leveraged the 25, the 4 gave 18. But I had to commit, and I didn't know anything about mosquitoes, okay? And through inspiration and through just driving what we did, and it's a whole separate topic, I promise you, it's an amazing journey. I didn't come here to talk about malaria. But what we've done in that program is beyond anything in terms of creativity. We took the Nando's model and we've done layers of stuff into Mozambique. Now, we don't tell the public. Who we tell are people in our business. Okay, so what we've now got is people from around the world coming to Mozambique to spray and help do work. So somebody from Malaysia, Australia, and all of a sudden they're doing real stuff. They're not coming and spraying a little wall. And there's there's no branding. So there's no Nando's branding in the middle of Matutwen. You know what I mean? They go in embedded with the spray operators and they go graft. At the same time, we've now got a peri-peri farm in Mozambique where we grow chilies and we pick chilies. And so it's an internal program that talks to purpose internally, which means that our people are, and I'm talking about worldwide, okay? Much more international than in South Africa. And that inspires people beyond anything to work for this company to sell the most magnificent chicken.